welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 366, and today's date is May 14th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Russia Gives the Green Light to De-Dollarize the World. And what do we know? Well, we understand the United States, the central bankers, decided to push and push and push Russia with personal sanctions on individuals, sanctions on banks, and Russia decided, you know what? Let's create our own payment system. Let's remove ourselves from the dollar at this point. And they started to go out and make deals with China, India, North Korea, Syria, Iran, and many other nations around the world to use only the ruble to trade in. And we can see what is happening at this time. They are pushing this agenda forward. They want to completely separate themselves from the dollar. And most of the government officials in Russia right now are removing all their assets from the West. They're bringing it back to Russia at this time. So this way, if there are more sanctions imposed, they won't even be touched, and they couldn't hurt these government officials. So we can see how this is all playing out at this time. We understand in Ukraine, the Donetsk region had a referendum. They are saying that they are separate and apart. They're autonomous from Ukraine. And of course, Ukraine and the United States central bankers say, absolutely not. We do not recognize this. And this whole thing is because the United States wanted to capture Ukraine. They set up a coup d'etat, and they overthrew the elected government with a government of their choosing, which is a puppet regime, put them into power, and here they are. They are in power at this time. And there have been no elections, and even the elections coming up in May are going to make no difference whatsoever, because those candidates that have been chosen are all within the same puppet regime. So it makes no difference who is elected or who becomes into power, because it wasn't open to the people. They didn't have the candidates from the people. They chose who they wanted in power because they have to keep that puppet regime structure in place. Before we get into the economic collapse news, I just want to make one announcement. Tomorrow morning, I will be posting an interview on the X22report.com site and the X22 Report YouTube channel. It is an interview with Dabu7. It's around 40 to 45 minutes long, and I'll be posting that tomorrow morning, which is Thursday. And those people who are on the alert system, you will get an email when the interview is posted, so check that out. All right, let's get into the economic collapse news. And what are we seeing? Well, we understand that the Euro nations are in deep trouble. They are, they're in a depression. Unemployment is really high. The debt is out of control. It seems like there is no hope at all. And what we're seeing right now is the Eurozone industrial output unexpectedly fell in March on the year for the first time since August as energy production slumped. The output in the 18 countries sharing the euro dipped 0.1% on the year due to the steepest drop in energy production in nearly 5 years. They expected a 1% rise in industrial production, and guess what happened? They didn't see it. Just like they expected the GDP in the United States to rise to 3% or so, and guess what? They didn't see it at all in the United States. We actually had a negative GDP. Now, what we are seeing here in Germany, and it looks like we're coming up to a major slowdown in Germany, and we have to look at all the factors that we're looking at this time. China, the rebalancing will cost Germany export volume. Germany has the most expensive energy policy in Europe, a drive away from the atomic power dependency to a less obvious dependency on Russian gas. The Ukraine crisis impacts Germany. According to the Federation of German Wholesale, Foreign Trade and Services, about 6,200 German companies are doing business in Russia. More than 6,200 German companies are involved in Russia. More than 300,000 jobs depend on Russia export. Russia is Germany's 11th biggest export market, and it's the 7th biggest import market. Germany now imports more than 70% of its energy, and which more than 25% comes from Russia. So we can see how this is going to play out, that Germany's economy from all of this, because they're so dependent, we can see that there's going to be some type of major slowdown coming up. And as time goes on, we will see, because as they place, more of these ridiculous sanctions, and as Russia fights back with not allowing the United States to use Russian rockets, and this game is continually played, Germany, the European nations are going to be completely cut out of this. They're going to be cut off from the natural gas if Ukraine doesn't pay, and we're going to end up in really big. They're going to end up in big problems over there in Europe. Now, here in the United States, what we're seeing is that the producer prices surge most in over 4 years. And the U.S. government reported that the producer prices, as part of a newly re-indexed PPI series, spiked by 2.1% from a year ago, or a whopping 0.6% surge in April. Now, of course, why such a surge in producer prices? Why? Because of food. Now, we all know this, that we're seeing inflation all over the place. We're seeing it in all the natural products. I'm not talking about the processed foods. I'm talking about the natural foods. Apples, bananas, milk, meats. We're seeing a rise in food prices, or the devaluing of the dollar, and we're seeing prices go up. And this is what we're seeing right now. The higher prices are from meats, gasoline, light motor trucks, residential electric power, processed poultry, and eggs. This is how we are seeing the prices go up, and we all know this, that prices on products are definitely going up, and the major companies are trying to mask it by shrinking them down, by not using the same ingredients in products, and eventually what happens is they can't do that anymore because the value of the dollar continually drops, and they actually have to raise their prices. And we're seeing this from many, many companies all over the country at this time. Now, Sony is having a very tough time right now. Sony Corp warned on Wednesday of a second consecutive net loss for this financial year. It is struggling to recover. 50 billion yen net loss for the 2014-2015 financial year. They can't get out of this. The economy is dying, and just like I reported yesterday, the electronic retail sector is completely imploding on itself. People just don't have the money to go out and purchase these goods. Macy's is seeing a decline in sales. It fell by 1.6%. Of course, they were expecting to see an increase of 1.3%, and it was a negative 1.6%. Why? Because they're not understanding the American people. When the American people are threatened with job loss, being laid off, and we're hearing all these layoffs in the news, Barclays, RPS, UPS, Sony, Dell, and this is not just a couple hundred. I don't want to forget Wells Fargo, Bank of America. This is thousands upon thousands of people. And these people who heard and hear these rumblings of layoffs start to send their resumes out. And when they send them out and they're not getting a response, they get scared. They hoard their money. They say, you know what? That can wait. We don't need to spend on this. We're not going out there and spending. And those people that have already been laid off, guess what? They don't have disposable income. They don't have the extra money to go out and purchase these goods. And I don't believe that these companies are understanding, or they do understand it, and they're just not letting everyone know that the economy is completely falling apart. And this is what's happening. The people are unemployed and underemployed. This 6.3% unemployment rate is a complete illusion. Now, as the title says, Russia is giving the green light to de-dollarize the world here, and they're looking, and I've said this before, they're looking to bypass the dollar completely. They don't want to be involved with the dollar. It is dying, it's imploding on itself, and Russia is actively pushing on with plans to put the US dollar in the rearview mirror and replace it with a dollar-free system. The country's Minister of Finance is ready to greenlight a plan to radically increase the role of the Russian ruble in export operations while reducing the share of dollar-denominated transaction. Russian banking sector is ready to handle the increased number of ruble-denominated transactions at this time. April 24th, the government organized a special meeting dedicated to finding a solution for getting rid of the U.S. dollar in Russian export operations. Top-level experts from the energy sector, banks, and government agencies were summoned, and a number of measures were proposed as a response for American sanctions against Russia. De-Dollarization meeting was chaired by the first Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, Igor Shuvalov, proving that Moscow is very serious in its intention to stop using the dollar, adding that none of the polled exports and bank representatives found any problem with the government's plan to increase the share of ruble payments. And they have some type of law in Russia where a currency switch executive order telling that the government has the legal power to force Russian companies to trade a percentage of certain goods in rubles only. So we can see what's going on here. They are making deals with many different nations, especially with China, and they are going to push this agenda forward. They've been purchasing gold for many, many years, just like China. China has been purchasing a lot more gold, and we can see they are getting ready to push this agenda forward. They want to completely detach themselves from the West because they see what is happening. They see the Euro nations are completely full on in debt. There is no way out of it. They are placing austerity on the people. The people cannot find work. There's no way to pay this debt off. The IMF, the central banks are coming in, robbing the countries of their natural resources, taking their minerals, their gold, anything that's physical they can get their hands on. That's what they're doing as they give them paper and ink. So we can see what's happening all across the world, and we can see that the countries and the central banks that hold the dollar, it continually falls. Back in 2000, it was 55% of the countries and central banks that held the dollar in reserves. Today, it's at 33%. By the end of this year, they're saying it's going to be down to 20 to 25%. And in 2015, I can't even imagine. It'll be just a couple of percentage of countries and central banks that will be holding the dollar in reserves. And we see in Africa right now that China set up a clearinghouse in Kenya. They're pouring billions of dollars into the infrastructure of Central Africa. Of course, that's why the United States central bankers are there, and they are having each one of the countries there start to wind down their dollar reserves and ramp up the yuan reserves, and we can see this happening in many countries in Africa at this time. Now, there was a survey out there, and this was a Gallup survey, and it was a new poll that they took, and it said that 72% of the voters believed most members of Congress should be given the pink slip. Well, I would say the same exact thing. I think I would say 99% of the Congress bought and paid for. They are no use to the people whatsoever. They do not support the people whatsoever, and they need to go. Actually, we should just take everyone, remove them, and replace them with a government that will actually support the people, support the United States, and look at our country and say, you know what? We need to work on the country. We cannot worry about everything else going on around the world. And the only reason we are around the world is because of the central bankers. They have to continually push the debt into more and more countries for this system to work. If they stop and the debt stops, the system starts to implode on itself and the value of the dollar decreases, so they have to continually do this. The system cannot be sustained, and this is why we are in this situation we are in right now. When we start this government over, we have to go back to absolutely no central bank. The government needs to coin the money, and without interest, of course. And we need to do this when it is time to restart this country. Now, of course, we hear all the propaganda about Nigeria, how the United States is, the Department of Justice is ramping up, getting ready to go down into Nigeria. And of course, Senator McCain, he's out there and giving a lot of lip service, and he's out there saying that, you know what, he would like to see U.S. troops sent to Nigeria to rescue the girls, whether the Nigerian government gives permission or not. How interesting. You mean like every other country we are in, the governments of those countries did not give permission. The United States government, central bankers, just went ahead and invaded those countries. This went on to say that if they knew where they were, I certainly would send in U.S. troops to rescue them in a New York minute, and I would without permission of the host country, McCain said. Representative Peter King was out there. He would support sending U.S. Special Forces to rescue the girls. So they're building the case. And we understand those pictures that were taken weren't even of Nigerian girls. It was girls from Guinea-Bissau, and which was thousands and thousands of miles away. And they were using this as propaganda because what do they want to do? They want to bring in troops into Central Africa because we understand that China is making deals with the Nigerian government at this time. They've been making deals with Kenya. They're creating a railway down in Africa, and China is pumping in billions of dollars into this region. And this is why, and we can't forget that Nigeria has a lot of oil and natural resources like gold, and the United States central bankers want to get in there. They want to pump the oil from there, put it on the U.S. dollar, take control of the country, and rob the country of its natural resources, because this is how they do it in every single country. Now, Russia and Cuba intend to provide a rapid response to security threat. The Security Council of Russia and the Committee for National Security and Defense of Cuba signed a memorandum on cooperation in Moscow on Wednesday and agreed to set up a joint working group. Russia and Cuba will have an opportunity to respond to the events in a more rapid manner. So we can see what's happening here. They are building and getting ready for what is coming. Russia is making plans all around the world, just like we see the United States and NATO, because they understand these central bankers will not give up. They will not say, okay, we can't be with the reserve currency, we give, you know what, let's switch to a different currency. No. They want to keep what they have. They will go down kicking and screaming. They will start an event. They will start in a war to prove that they are in control, and they do believe when this war is over, and whoever survives it, and who's ever left after this World War III, because you know eventually it will go nuclear, and a lot of people will be killed, and whoever is left, they believe they can restart the entire system and have the countries rebuild using their whatever currency they choose at the time, and put these countries back into debt and start this system all over again. And of course, this time they want to do it on their terms. If in the United States they do believe once it's restarted, they are looking to have no constitution whatsoever. This is why they're implementing Common Core, to dumb down the people just to become good workers. They don't want people to have creativity. They do not want people to think. They want people to be the same and work the same. And this is where they are headed. They will eventually disarm everyone, and this is their plans. This is what they think they're going to do. And of course, they have bunkers underground. They'll be safe, and all of us will be exposed to what is happening here. Now, Russia is looking to move away from international rating agencies, and of course it's just a matter of time that they're going to do this. I mentioned this before in another report, and we're out there today. Russia, especially the Russian Finance Ministry, believes moving away from the International Ratings Agency is just a question of time. Russia is eager to break the world monopoly of rating systems and create its own rating giants. They don't even want to be a part of the West Rating Agency, because we all know they're bought and paid for. We realize their ratings they mean absolutely nothing. I mean, they were rating the subprime securities AAA, and guess what? They were garbage. They rated the U.S. government, and they brought them down a notch. The U.S. government sued them, and they said, okay, we'll leave it the way it is. So we can see right now these rating agencies are bought and paid for. They are absolutely meaningless. Other countries around the world are realizing this, and they're going to start their own rating agency. China's starting their own, Russia's starting their own, and you'll see this spread. And of course, the BRIC nations will create rating agencies to monitor their own system. And we can see how this is being pushed forward. Now, we understand that Vice President Joe Biden was in Ukraine. He was visiting there along with the CIA, FBI, NATO. They were all down there in Ukraine. And of course, why was Joe Biden there? Well, we come to find out, and I said this yesterday, that his son was put in as a director into one of the gas giants in Ukraine. Now, the White House is out there, and they're pretty much saying that there's no issue here whatsoever. He is a private citizen, and where they work does not reflect an endorsement by the administration or by the vice president or president. Well, I kind of think it does, because there's a situation going on in Ukraine caused by the United States government central bankers. We understand there was a coup. Joe Biden just so happened to visit Ukraine, and then all of a sudden, not even a month later, his son joins the board of directors there. And of course, the White House is out there saying that there's nothing to see here. Please move along. Please mind your own business. It's none of your business, and you should have no say in this whatsoever. And I believe the people of the United States do have a say in it, because these are our elected officials. They work for us. Why all of a sudden did his son get involved with a gas company and join the board of directors in Ukraine at the same exact moment when there was a coup, when the United States central bankers implemented the puppet regime, when the United States bailed them out with $1 billion and the IMF bailed them out with $17 billion? Why all of a sudden is he there now? And it is our business, because these people work for us. We do not work for them. And he is associated with the vice president. So it does become our business at this time. Okay, now we understand that Donetsk had a referendum, but it looks like the UN is not going to recognize Donetsk. A lot of nations do recognize that Donetsk is autonomous at this time, but the UN, of course, the UN's kind of controlled by the United States central bankers, and they're not going to recognize Donetsk at this point. Now, what's very interesting is that Ukrainian authorities have been using helicopters, and they had the UN symbol on there. Now, they loaned these helicopters out to the UN for peacekeeping operations, and they placed the UN symbols on there, and the helicopters were returned to Ukraine. But they just so happened to take off, forgot to take off the UN logo as they were flying them around in the country. And of course, Russia's out there saying that, Ukraine authorities should have removed UN symbols from the helicopters used by the Ukrainian National Guard, because it is a little confusing thinking that, it's the UN coming in, and it really is Ukrainian forces, paid mercenaries, the National Guard flying around in UN helicopters. Now, I kind of think they did this on purpose to confuse the situation and to let these people let their guard down. And this is why they actually did it right now. Now, there's a political commentator out there saying that the United States is backing the junta in Kiev to implement a global strategy of encircling Russia. And I've said this many times. The United States central bankers are out there at this time, and they are encircling China, containing China, as President Obama says, and making sure when this world war starts, they have all bases and everything ready to go. We see the same thing happening in Russia. They have the missile shield set up. NATO and U.S. forces have been moving in troops and military assets, and at this time they have been surrounding Russia because they are preparing for war. And this is what they do. Incrementally, they continually move in more and more. And if you look at the bases that are surrounding, and I mentioned this before in another report where there are many, many bases surrounding China, and if you look at the Eastern European bases with NATO and the United States, all these bases pretty much encircle Russia at this time. Now, Ukraine is agreeing to have talks with the Donetsk people, but they don't want them included. So who are they having talks with? I guess the United States and Russia, because Kiev agrees to hold a dialogue as part of the OSCE plan, but it's but its success remains doubtful as the people who were fighting for their democracy and freedom and to be autonomous from Ukraine are not invited, just like the first talks. The first talks, they were not invited either. So how do you have talks without the people being invited? It makes no sense, because if they invite them, then they recognize them. If they recognize them, the world views them differently. If they say, oh no, they're not invited because we don't recognize them, the world says, well, what's the purpose of these talks then? So really, they're not looking for peace right now. They're looking to push their agenda forward, and that is to continually try to capture the entire country of Ukraine. So at this time, as we can see from all the evidence and the actions of the United States central bankers, so far they're not looking for peace because they've been driving this mission all along. Now, Ukraine, this is unbelievable. Ukraine just issued 1 billion bonds backed by the U.S. taxpayers. Ukraine issued 1 billion 5-year notes. The bond is guaranteed by the U.S. Agency for International Development and assures full repayment of principal and interest based on the full faith and credit of the United States taxpayer. So right now, all of us in this country are backing the bond issuing in Ukraine. $1 billion worth. How in the world is this happening, and why isn't anyone stopping this? So we can see at this point that the United States central bankers have taken control of Ukraine, and they're pushing their monetary debt policy across the globe. This is the evidence. There's no way to look at this any differently, and we are holding the guarantee to this, and this should never be allowed to happen. Now, of course, Ukraine's bondholders could face losses if the people of Donetsk and other regions decide to gain their independence, and the breakup of the country could potentially force the International Monetary Fund to tear up Ukraine's current $17 billion aid package and trigger a debt restructuring program that would hit private investors in that country. So you can see what is happening right here. The bank told Ukraine, the puppet regime, take control of the country. Do not let these people secede from Ukraine. If they do, we're going to have to look inward into all the banks and all the private investors in Ukraine to recoup our money. And the United States government central bankers are now issuing bonds, and the taxpayers of the United States are responsible for that. Now, out in Libya, what we're seeing here is the government there is having a very rough time paying the Libyan soldiers. And Libyan soldiers in charge of securing the Prime Minister's office blocked cars from leaving the building on Wednesday in protest at not having been paid. They haven't been paid for quite a while. Now, the people of Libya are pushing the government further and further out of the country. They're taking control. They're having trouble paying their military. And what do you think is going to happen eventually? Eventually, these people saying, we're not getting paid anyhow. Forget this. This government is worthless. We're going with the other side. We're going with the people. And you'll see soldiers move themselves to the other side. And of course, we have to remember the United States told Libyan government that if you cannot gain control in 2 months, we will bring in the forces and take control of the country. And this is a foot in the door. This is how the United States, NATO, UN are going to move forces into the country, and they will stay there. And they will have another war going on in Libya. Now, of course, we're seeing this happen all over the Middle East because they're losing control, and we can see this. And of course, Obama approves a sale of $1 billion in military equipment to Iraq. The United States has approved the $1 billion, and all this military equipment is going to head down to Iraq. The administration of President Barack Obama has notified Congress of a military aid package meant to enhance Iraq's security. Now, why do they need this? Because the people are rising up. And we have to remember those people are called terrorists, just like the people in Ukraine, or here in the news they like to call them al-Qaeda. And these are just people who want their country back, and they're pushing the central bankers out. They want the United States government out, and this is why we see the government giving them money to purchase military assets. And the official said the package includes aircraft, combat vehicles, surveillance aerostats. They're bringing it all in to maintain control of Iraq. Okay, now at the New York Stock Exchange, it looked like the New York Stock Exchange was broken for an hour. At 11:38 Eastern Time, the New York Stock Exchange reported that its data feed is currently experiencing an issue with a symbol range D through J. And it just stayed down for about an hour or so. Now, I've been saying that they've been preparing for some type of cyber attack. They put in some type of malware or some type of virus or added extra programming to the exchanges. We understand they implemented kill switches in the New York Stock Exchange, the BATS, and the NASDAQ, because I do believe when this event occurs, it will not just be one event, it will be a multi-pronged event, and it will include the financial institutions. And this is why we're seeing all these strange hiccups and things not working well. And this has just been recent. This has not been going on for a very long time. And we can see how this is continually building as time goes on. Now, I've been saying in many reports, it seems like we're in a repeat of August of 2013, or prior to that date when they announced the false flag event that Assad is using chemical weapons. And what we're seeing now is the buildup to this once again, because they're not putting all this in place for no reason. They're not meeting with the opposition, giving them government status. They're not giving them $27 million or a total of $287 million for absolutely no reason. They're not shipping in anti-aircraft and anti-tank missiles down into Jordan, and where they're training thousands of soldiers at secret bases, and they're also training soldiers in Qatar. This is for a purpose. It always is. Of course, you can't see it right now, but when we connect everything, it creates a picture. And here's more to this picture, because we understand they are going to do something very soon. And what we're seeing right now is Obama meets the Syrian paid mercenaries. I'm not even going to call them the opposition. They're paid mercenaries. The leader, Jarba, U.S. president, meets the Syrian National Coalition leader in show of support for embattled foes of President Assad. The White House said it condemned the Assad's government, deliberate targeting of Syrian civilians with barrel bombs, and the denial of humanitarian help in areas under siege by the Syrian army. So they are building the propaganda once again. And of course, Obama was out there, and he was saying that that Syrian President Assad has lost his legitimacy and has no place in the country's future whatsoever. So they are building this up once again. Like I said, they are doing this for a specific purpose, because their end goal is to remove Assad. And here we are. They need to build it up incrementally. We understand the elections are coming up June 3rd. We're getting closer and closer. We understand they've been using the propaganda of Assad hiding chemical weapons. They're having a tough time removing the last 8% of the chemical weapons. We understand that Syrian Electronic Army has been attacking the CENTCOM base, CNN, the United States Armed Force websites. They've been putting up messages, making sure everyone realizes that it's the Syrian Electronic Army. And we can see that they're continually doing this. And of course, they're telling us that Syria is the launching pad for terrorism. And now a new report has come out that Syrian Iraqi terror group could target U.S. They are continually building up this propaganda. They want you to believe that something is going to happen. Of course, it's going to be created to make you believe it's coming from Syria, because what would be the motive behind this? Right now, Assad is winning They're pushing the rebels out. The elections are coming up. It looks like he will be the leader once again from all the initial polls that are coming out. And the United States central bankers realize this. And this is why they kicked out all the Syrian government officials in the United States. They closed all the embassies and brought in the paid mercenaries as the new acting government at this time. They don't really care about elections. Just look at Ukraine. But right now, this new report says former al-Qaeda affiliate gaining power in Syria. The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, a former al-Qaeda affiliate, may soon be focusing on attacking Western countries. And this is coming from the Washington Post. Intelligence agencies are concerned that European jihadists and other groups could travel to the United States. Intelligence analysts are said to be especially concerned about roughly about 1,500 foreign fighters who hold European passports, which allow them to travel freely across the continent and to enter the United States with relative ease. A former U.S. official cited in the piece said that the Syrian terrorist threat may be the most worrying development in the Middle East since the 70s. What do you think they are building up for right now? I'm going to tell you. They're building up for this main event. Again, this is not done just to do something. It's not coincidence. It is a strategic plan laid out to create an event for us to go in, and when I say us, it's the central bankers, United States government, to go into Syria and remove Assad. This is why all of this is happening at this time. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. And look for that interview with Dabu7. I will be posting it on the X22Report.com site, and I will also upload it to the YouTube channel of X22 Report. So take a look, and it's very interesting. Thanks a lot.